Hi, so today we're going to talk about Erikson's theory of psychosocial development. This theory is the theory of stages from birth to death. This is the only theory that talks about stages from birth to death. Um, there hasn't been anybody else that has talked about stages from birth to death, or at least to death. From birth, yes, but not to death. Um, So today's lesson is basically going to be the 8 stages of development, which are number 2 to 9, and then we're going to talk about what is this Erikson's psychosocial development. So what is it? These are the stages of development from birth to death. I've already said that how many times, but it is. Um, and it at each stage there is a crisis. So we're going to talk about um, like one thing versus another. Each stage is different, um, but if the crisis is not averted, it can create an unhealthy personality in a person. Um, the person that actually studied this said that there is room for growth throughout your whole life. So you can always change if you decide or if you haven't averted your crisis. The first stage is trust versus mistrust. This is ages from birth to 18 months. So these are babies. Babies are just starting to learn whether they should trust you or not. They haven't known you long enough to be able to trust you. So your actions actually mean a lot to them. Um, an example of this would be if they're crying. If they're crying and you're not doing anything about it and you're just letting them cry it out, um, even if they needed something, they might start to build this mistrust towards you because you're not getting or giving them what they need. And they're babies, they can't take care of themselves, so you will need to be able to take care of them. Um, if you are a loving and caring caregiver, then they're going to start to trust you and it's going to help them later on in life. The second stage of development would be autonomy versus doubt. This is ages 18 months to 3 years old. Um, this stage is the one where you kind of want to let kids be independent. They're still learning how to do things. They're learning their gross and fine motor skills. So they're still learning how to walk. They're starting to learn how to use the bathroom by themselves. They're going to make mistakes, but you need to let them make their own mistakes so that they can learn. They need to start being independent learners. That way they can learn themselves. You don't have to teach them every single little thing, but they will look towards you um, for guidance. So, like if they're learning how to walk, they're going to look at you and see how you're walking, and then they're going to start to develop those. Um, you starting to talk or to walk. Sorry. The third stage is initiative versus guilt. This is ages 3 through 6. This is where kids are starting to ask you more questions. Um, you might start getting annoyed because they're asking you so many questions like, what are you doing? What is that for? What is this for? Why aren't we doing this? Blah 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 blah. But they mean well. They're little people, They're haven't learned as much as you learned, and you just have to be mindful of that. They're starting to learn their purpose in life, uh, and that's why they're asking so many questions. They want to know more, just like you know. Um, with this, limits do have to be set, um, limits and boundaries, because if you don't have those limits, then you might get mad, and if you get mad, they're going to start to feel guilty. They're going to start thinking, oh, what am I doing wrong? Which they're not doing anything wrong. They're curious. I believe this is the fourth stage, industry versus inferiority. This is ages 6 to 12 years old. Um, this is where they're starting to want approval. So this is around the late elementary school years. Um, I want to say maybe fourth through sixth grade. Not exactly sure of the grades, but I know 12 is around sixth grade. They start to want your approval and they start to notice things about themselves. They want you to know that they're competent, so they seek approval. So with that, you see that in a lot of like sixth grade, fourth, fifth, and sixth grade classes, I believe. They raise their hand and they get an answer right, then they kind of want that, like, hey, I did that, awesome. I did that, or I answered that question great. And then you can be like, oh, yes, you did amazing. Let's, you know, good job. Basically, they want like kind of your words of encouragement in return. Failure is needed in this because if they don't fail, then they don't learn. They learn from their mistakes, and that's something you can explain to them. Hey, you got this answer wrong. So let's move forward from that and let's keep going. And you'll learn it eventually. The fifth stage is identity versus role confusion. This is ages 12 through 18. This is more of like the high school years. And you'll see this in a lot of high schoolers. They are trying to find their identity. You might see kids that parents might say, oh, you're just going through a phase. If they're, I want to say like goth or something. Or in high school, I saw a lot in high school actually, because I've just recently graduated a couple years ago. You will see students maybe dyeing their hair. Girls will dye their hair like all kinds of different colors because they want to figure out who they are. They're trying to find who they are, and maybe they're finding other things, personal things within them. If in this stage, they might be confused about who they are. And if they do, this is the stage where they're finding their identity, but if they don't, they get confused about who they are. If they don't know who they are, they're kind of lost. They don't know who they are. This may go into maybe their 20s too. I know it doesn't say it in the theory, but I feel like I've seen a lot of people personally who still try and find who they are, even in college. If they're still confused, they might rebel. I've seen a lot of kids in high school where you'll see kids rebel. They want to be able to control something, and if they're rebelling, that's something they can control if they can't find their own identity. This is the next stage. I believe this is stage 6. Um, Intimacy versus isolation. This is ages 19 through 40 years old. I'm actually in this stage right now. I'm 20 years old, about to be 21. This is where people are looking for commitment, love, and care. So things that you want to feel, or no, not feel. You want to be able to have love or feel love for somebody. This is where you're kind of finding your relationships with other people. It doesn't necessarily have to be love, but you're finding those relationships. It may be with a partner, like intimate partner. It can be with friends. It can be with family. You're just trying to figure out, the relationships you have with other people. And if you don't, people tend to isolate themselves. And if they isolate themselves, they become unhappy. I've seen this with a couple of my friends actually. I saw this with my ex when first time we broke up. He was kind of lost and he didn't know what he was doing with his life. So it was kind of in between the last stage and this stage. He couldn't find those relationships with people. People weren't necessarily connecting with him. And then he started to isolate himself. And this was at the beginning of quarantine. And that was probably a lot worse during quarantine too. But he started to isolate himself, and that's when we broke up, but that's fine. I find connections and relationships with other people, but uh, this is the one where this is the one I'm going through right now. Um, and you may not find intimacy, but you doesn't necessarily mean you need to isolate yourself. The next one is gen. This is always the hard one to say. Generavity. I'm just gonna say it like that versus stagnation. Um, Generavity would be more of like, or this stage is actually the stage from 40 years old to 65 years old. This is where people are starting to be parents, or maybe like they've already been parents and they're still trying to figure out um, what they did in life or what they have done in life. Um, this is where this is the stage where people are most caring towards others, because you're either taking care of your kids, maybe you're taking care of your friends, if you don't have kids. And this is basically, I put a fingerprint on the world, but this is basically how people in this stage are reflecting on who they are and what mark they made on the world. Or like, I put fingerprint there because like, a fingerprint, you put if you see your fingerprint, it makes a mark on the paper, right? So this is basically the stage where people are trying to figure out what they did in life, and this is where it goes into the next stage: integrity versus despair. This is actually the last stage. This is ages 65 to death. This is where people reflect on life, um, if they were productive or not. People often uh, try and find what they did in life and if they did enough. Um, if, let's see, I can kind of see this in my grandparents right now because they're in their 70s, hopefully not that close to death, but we never know with life. Um, but I sometimes talk to them about what they did in life, and they like to go and talk about it, about what they did in life because they were really productive. My grandparents are from the East Coast, and they ended up moving to California later on in life, and they actually stayed there because my grandpa was in the Navy. Um, and so they ended up staying in California because my grandma loved it here. Um, and so she just loves talking about what she's done. She used to be a veterinary assistant. She went to college in the East Coast, so did my grandpa. And then they love to talk about, they had two boys, my dad and my uncle. Um, and yeah, they just like to reflect on what they did in life. Something I do see, I do also see the despair side. My other grandma was uh, she did a lot in life, though. She did a lot, but maybe she was dissatisfied, and that's where the despair comes in. Maybe she didn't do enough in life that she wanted to do. Um, but yeah, those are the 8 stages. I hope you liked it, and yeah.